Let me say that again. You're either running from pain or you're seeking to feel alive. But here's the thing, when you're running from pain, you actually become the negative version of who you're supposed to be because you're running from the very places that might have actually begun to bring you life if you actually push through. But we're also searching for this feeling to be alive, and sometimes we lie to ourselves and we take on this illusion that maybe we feel like we're really alive and we're feeling like this, but it's actually not even happening. You ever have those moments? Like even at a theme park, I'm talking about a roller coaster, not like a roller coaster. A roller coaster or what? No, I'm talking about that. I'm talking about like a roller coaster. You ever go on a roller coaster and you're like, man, this is crazy, it's awesome. You're at this like high moment, and then 30 minutes later, you're like, okay, like what's next, right? In life is very similar that way. Like we have these high moments, and then 30 minutes later we come down and we're like, we wish we were dead. If we're honest. Remember when Avatar came out? Love that movie. I was so cool. I saw like the new 3D, all that stuff. But remember that phenomenon? I don't know if you remember this. There's this phenomenon of people who went to go see Avatar, went to go see those giant blue Smurfs, and they would go in there and they would like transcend into this world of Pandora, and they would look at it and be like, there's all these colors and all these things, and there was this phenomenon that would happen after people would go see this movie where they call it the Avatar Blues. Do you remember this? Like people would be depressed because their life sucked compared to these overgrown Smurfs. Right? They would get out there and they'd be like, man, my life is worse. These stupid giant Smurfs. Like I hate my life. And then go back and they'd watch the movie again just to feel something again like that. I remember when I first got a house. Like I never thought I'd be able to afford a house in this market. Some of you guys can relate. Some of you guys are like, I don't know how I'm doing either. Like $2 million for a BC box. It's nuts. But I first got a townhouse. I was so excited. It was a brand new townhouse. Like I was pumped, right? 4 bedrooms. It was like the end unit. Had a double car garage. And I was like, man, right? Like I'm legit. Like I got this made. And then I went down to visit some friends in California. If you guys don't know my story, it was on the TV show, and so it was like a year kind of after we were doing like a little bit of this reunion thing. The show was still going, so I was meeting the new cast, I was kind of coaching some of the guys in the show. But after, like, kind of while I was down there, and I'm driving around in my rented Enterprise Toyota Corolla. Yeah, high life, bro. Hashtag winning, right? Like, I was driving around and I was invited to a party. And in this party the party was thrown by this man named Dr. Robert Heisenberg. He was the doctor on the show that I was in. If you guys don't know any of the story, Google him after. He's got a crazy story. He was the doctor, he was the team doctor for the Raiders. He's been on tons of TV shows. O.J. Simpson, who just died, he was one of the doctors that was on the defense, which is it's just crazy. Like this guy's got crazy stories. So he invites me over to his house for a party, and I remember pulling up to the thing in my Toyota Corolla and thinking I'm legit, thinking I've got this, amazing house, this 4-bedroom, 2,000 square feet townhouse, and I pull up to his house in Malibu, and it's overlooking the coast, and it's like, I'm pretty sure I could fit like 30 of my houses in there. I think they're like, sir, they're like, no Uber parking here, and I'm like, the problems I had one of those like things on. I'm just kidding. So I pull up, and I remember having that wash of like, oh man, it's almost like that not good enough, like or that wash of like, oh man, I wish I was in a better standing or a better place than where I'm at now. It's this time in my life, and I remember this time really specifically because it was this time in my life where I was desperately searching for meaning in my life. And I was a Christian, I was a follower of Jesus at this point. I did quite a few jobs up until that moment, but I was desperately searching. I was in those transition moments, I was desperately searching for God, what do you have for me? And what I realized later is that there's these moments in life that will steal your life. Like, I should have been either celebrating, like, hanging out with celebrities and TV execs, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was here at this party, but here I am lamenting, like, I don't have a house that's as big as his, or I'll never have this. There's moments in life that will steal your life. Even as you search for life, but you can't understand that unless you realize that there's those two forces that are pulling against you. That either you're running from pain or you're running towards life. I've been doing a lot of funerals lately, and there's this guy who actually is here. They have a funeral home. It's awesome. Like I love it. They call me up all the time when they have somebody who died and they're not connected to a church or anything. So like, hey Jordan, would you come to a funeral? And I love it. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, right? Like how awesome is it that these people, for some reason, they have in their brains, they're not followers of Jesus, that they're not Christians, but they have for some reason in their brain that they need a pastor to do their funeral. And so they call me up and they're like, hey, can you do this funeral? And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing, I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian, like is it okay if I pray for you guys? They're like, I don't know, like, okay, I'll do it anyway. And then they're like, okay, but we don't really want you to preach at it. And I'm like, don't worry, I'm not gonna preach, I'll just tell a story about a man who died. His name was Lazarus. And it's actually funny, if they have some Christian background, I tell them I'm gonna preach about Lazarus. Their eyes get really big. I'm like, are you going to risk grandma for that? So I go in there, and I put my hand on the coffin. Gretchen! Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. But I love sharing this story of Lazarus, and as I was even prepping for today, I was thinking of these moments of life and death in our lives, and I think oftentimes we see life and death as two kind of like separate entities. Right? We think that we live, we have this life, and then we die, and then, right, like who knows? Like we're still kind of unsure. But what happens in John chapter 11 is where we'll be for the rest of this talk. We're going to be talking about this idea of life and death, because Jesus sees it completely different than what we do. And Jesus begins to unwrap in John chapter 11 for us that this view of reality in this extraordinary moment. He begins to help us understand that the way that we think as linear reality is actually more complicated than that. Because if we think about life and death, the time and eternity, we think of those like I was saying, those separate entities. But what he's saying is it's actually a lot more complex than that. But we live in a reality where we have darkness and light. We live in a reality where there's hope and despair. We live in a reality where there's joy and sorrow and hate and love. And when we think about death, we think of it as linear. What Jesus is actually going to help us see in John chapter 11, that the way we think about time is actually even incredibly wrong. It's not a linear journey from life to death. That life and death can actually coexist in the same reality. Because many of you guys here, whether you believe it or not, you feel more dead right now than most people do when they're walking around alive. You're the walking dead right now. And so I want to talk to that, I want to speak to that. So here we are, chapter 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Now this is Martha, brother of Lazarus, now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters went to Jesus. Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. And then in verse 10, he kind of wraps up this little thing and says, it is when a person walks at night they stumble, for they have no light. And John begins to unwrap this story, and you'll see it kind of interwoven throughout the narrative of this book, is that John wants us to understand that everything that's going to happen, even as spectacular as this moment and this end of the story is going to be, that everything here is actually fueled by one thing. It's fueled by love, and I understand the word love is weird. It's a weird concept to talk about in elementary. Right? It's sometimes it's awkward for us as men when we think about love. We think about God being in this love story with us. But John wants us to understand that there's this very specific man named Lazarus that was sick, and he was from Bethany. By the way, let me give you a little bit of context here. So Mary and her sister Martha, He explains this is very important that he explains this. Number one, he wants you to understand that there's actually lots of Marys in Jerusalem, and lots of Marys there. He's like, right? He's like, there's tons of Marys here, so I need you to understand which Mary it is. Whose brother is Lazarus, now lays sick. It's the same one who poured perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped it with her hair. And what we know about Mary, Mary's got a crazy story. We don't know anything about Mary. We know that somewhere in her life, kind of things took a bit of a turn for the worse. Like she ended up becoming a prostitute. She ended up even considering being unclean. It was just that she lived a really destructive life. And then she breaks into this conversation that Jesus is having with religious leaders, takes the year's worth of alabaster perfume, breaks it over his feet, washes Jesus' feet with her hair. It's an incredible story. John wants us to know this is the same Mary, not a different Mary. It's not a holier Mary, it's not an upgraded Mary, it's not an elite Mary, it's not a moral Mary, it's the same Mary that was considered unworthy and that's in this place with Jesus. She befriends Jesus. And not only does she befriend Jesus, understand that it's not just world. But here now he's getting specific. Yes, he loves the world. I'm not discounting that. He loves the world, but here he's getting specific. The one that Jesus loved. John wants us to understand that this whole story is to let us know that life is calling, but if life is calling, and as life is calling, we need to understand that this is a love story, and this entire story happens not because Jesus loved the world, not just because Jesus loved the people, but that he loves individual specific people. And in verse 3 it says, so the sister sent word to Jesus, and I think this is fantastic. We're going to break this in the scripture down. I love this. The one that you love is sick. Right? Like imagine praying to Jesus or talking to Jesus, and that was the only description that you had to give him, like Lord Jesus, help me out. The one you love needs a little cheddar, a little extra cheddar. I got to pay the rent this month, right? Like imagine if that was the one and only description that you actually needed to tell Jesus about who you were. But let me tell you something. Although you might think that's kind of funny, it's actually true. That's the only thing that you need to know and that Jesus knows when you say, hey, the one that you love, he's talking not just about Lazarus, he's talking about you. Lord, the one that you love, the second Jesus says that he knows what he's talking about. She knows exactly what she's talking about. And everything that God does, I need you to hear this, everything that God does in your relationship, everything that he allows to happen to you, comes from this motivation, this absolute motivation of love by God. The one who loves you is the one who sees you and knows you and adores you and waits for you to respond to him. And I love that she says, Lord, the one that you love is sick. And when he heard this, Jesus said, listen to this, he said, Jesus said, sickness is not unto death, nor is it for God's glory that God's Son may be glorified through this. And then in verse 5, he goes back, listen again. He says, now Jesus loved Martha, and he loved Mary, and he loved Lazarus. And so why is John, if you notice this as you're reading it, John is saying this as he's writing this, he's saying this over and over again. But he wants us to understand that what's going to happen is actually all motivated by that one thing. It's motivated by love. You ever have things though, even though when I was reading this, and some of these things just don't make sense. You ever have those moments with the Lord that you just don't make sense? God, what are you doing? In my life right now, this doesn't make any sense. Why would you let me go through this hurt and this pain? This doesn't make sense. Because sometimes it does not make sense at all. And in fact, this story continues. It becomes difficult. If you read this, we'll kind of break this down, but it starts to become difficult almost to understand, right? As Jesus is talking, it's a little bit hard to understand what he's talking about. He says, when he heard Lazarus was sick, what do you do, by the way? What do you do if you were to say, hey, Grandma's sick right now, you get a phone call, hey, Grandma's sick. She's in the hospital. What do you do?
Go.
Right, you go to the hospital. What did Jesus do?
Stayed.
He said, okay, cool. We're going to hang out a couple more days. Sometimes it feels like you're not on the same page with the Lord. That you're asking Him to show up. And things in your life have gone awry, probably from the bad choices that you made, right? And you're like, God, where are you? I screwed up. And then the Lord leaves us there for a couple more days. But we don't want Him to leave us there because we're like, no, we wish to rescue us now right after we make those bad choices, before the bad consequences come. Right? We're like, no, show up now. And He's like, no, I'm going to actually let you sit there for a minute. Sometimes it's 2 days, 3 days, 4 days go by, and you're like, man, what is happening? And here's the thing, I don't think we can actually learn from that. I don't think we can actually grow and move towards life if we don't actually understand and push through and persevere through the consequences. Listen to Kanye West at all. You guys ever follow his story?
Yeah.
Right? Like, dude was crazy before he came to know Jesus a bit, right? But made good music. Then he came to know Jesus, supposedly, or something, and then he went through this hardship in his life. Right? Like, you guys follow this? And now he's saying, like, I don't know if there's a God, actually. Because when I prayed to God, He didn't show up. He's like, that's it, I'm done. It never occurred to him that maybe God didn't want to rescue you out of those circumstances that you did, because on the other side of that desperation, on the other side of that hurt and that pain was actually life. I had this buddy in high school who I remember texting me one day, and he's like, hey man, I'm done with God. We grew up, like, we went to church together, we kind of stayed around the same time. We're done with God. I was like, well, why? He texted me back, he's like, well, my marriage is over. I prayed for God to show up. He didn't show up. I don't believe God. Right? Like, I was like, I'm a good pastor. I like to sit in the muck with people. Bro, it never occurred to you that you're the source of your problem, and you blame God for it. And what God is saying is actually when you persevere, there's actually could be life on the other side of what you think might be death. Experience. I wonder if what my friend experienced was maybe they experienced the Lord at one point, but they never actually let Him transform their character. And so we wait until things get worse, and sometimes we just want God to alleviate the difficulty of life and want God to make us strong. You ever pray for that? God, make me strong in this. But how will we ever be strong if we actually don't push through that time? Because those fires, those moments are actually what build you. They're actually what build your character. You'll never develop determination, integrity, and character if God is always trying to make your life easier for you, or if you see Him that way. When He waits, He stays, and He says to the disciple, let's go back to Judea. And after that time passes, He finally says, okay, let's go back. And I love what the disciples say. They say, Rabbi, a short while ago the Jews were trying to stone you. I don't mean like rock throws, right? Some of you guys are like, yeah. No, that's not what He's saying. And He's like, by the way, those people that were trying to stone you, they're still there. Right? They're starting to get freaked out. And by the way, there's probably still rocks there too. And if you didn't realize that it's not just you in this thing, Jesus, like, we're with you. And they'll probably know that we're with you. And so they start to get kind of freaked out because these people would have killed Jesus already. And they're saying, no, like, let's just hang out here. We know that Lazarus is sick. And it's okay. Like, they'll probably figure it out. He's either going to get sick or he's going to get better. Or he's going to die. Either way, like, what are we going to do about it, right? Like, let's just chill. Relax, Jesus. Let's just let Him work it out. I love Jesus' response here. Because this is a weird response. Right? The Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day of daylight? Anyone who walks in daylight will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks by night that they stumble and have no light." And if I'm one of the disciples, even in this moment, as Jesus is unpacking this, and he's saying this, I'm like, "God, what are you talking about, Jesus? Like, this is, like, I don't need a poem. This is a haiku? Like, you're like counting the... No, I was thinking haiku, like, it's like a good poem. I need you to not go when the people are going to kill you. I'm talking to you about poetry. There's 12 hours of daylight. But what he's actually saying is Jesus is saying to them that I always move in the light. And that when you're running from pain, what you're actually doing is moving into darkness. But when you're moving with intention, you're moving toward the light. And so Jesus is actually saying to them, you want me to avoid that place because it's a place of pain for you. You're running from pain, but I do not run from pain because I have a higher calling on my life. And the very fact that this place is a place that you're afraid to go, this place that's a point of pain for you, is actually a place, if you realize it, a place that you're going to find life and you're going to be fully alive. You want to avoid that word love. We want to avoid this idea of this kind of this mushy feelings or whatever it is, because somewhere along the line you started to believe that you're not worthy of love. Somewhere along the line you started believing that not only you're not worthy of love, you might start believing that you're not, that God's maybe not even worthy of love, that because He's distant, He's saying things in different ways that you need Him to show up. Prayed to Him, He didn't show up, but He wants you to understand that this life of love is actually worth the risk. And after He said this in verse 11, He went on to tell them, I love this, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to wake him up. And I love that look of His disciples, right? Because in this, this is how they replied. They're like, Lord, well, if he's sleeping, he'll get better. He's like, right. He just fell asleep, that's it. We don't need to go. Yeah, no stones thrown in my brain today, right? Like, they're like, legit, we don't need to go. He'll wake up on his own. But of course, He wasn't talking about natural sleep, and so then Jesus had to break it down plainly for them, right? I feel like sometimes we wish Jesus would just do it for us. Hey, guys, just break it down for us plainly. And so He's like, hey guys, Lazarus is dead. Okay? Didn't He just fall asleep? Like, he's dead. I was trying to like say, be cool like the way I said it, but obviously you guys you get some brain damage, and like, he's dead. So Jesus told him plainly after this that he's dead, and I love what He says, for your sake I'm glad I was not there that you may believe. Let's go to Him. And then Thomas comes along. Right? You hear about Thomas and you hear doubting Thomas. He's got history. Right? It wasn't just that one moment where after Jesus was resurrected, and he's like, hey, let me feel the holes and do all this stuff. There's moments like this before to earn that nickname. Right? Because listen to what Thomas says. He says what the rest of the disciples that were thinking. He's such an optimist. He goes, well, let us also go that we may die with Him. Right? And I just love that kind of optimism. Right? He's like, you know what's going to happen. We're going to die, He's going to die. And so, since you refuse to listen to Jesus, let's just go ahead and die together. And what Jesus is actually trying to teach them, that life is worth the risk, that if you're running from the hate, if you're running from all the criticism, if you're running from the danger in your life, if you're running from the conflict, you're running from all the pain, you're running from the wounds, you'll spend your whole life running away from the very thing that might actually bring you life. And some of us are like Thomas and said, like, I don't really know what to do, because yes, Jesus said, believe in you, but you insist on bringing me places where I don't really want to go. But I might as well go because we're just going to die with Him anyway. And what doesn't even occur to him is that we might as well go because we're not just going to die with Him, we're going to live with Him. You'll never experience life without love. You'll never experience love without being alive. They both are the greatest risk you'll ever take, and Jesus is trying to teach them that he wants to understand that he's calling you. That he's got a story of life that he's calling you, which is fueled by love. And so out of their frustration, that they followed Jesus. Because they couldn't find a way to talk him out of it, despite their best argument. They tried, like, either he's dead, or he's sleeping, whatever, let's forget about it. But Jesus says, we're going anyway because that's where the light is. Let me ask you a question, are you moving toward the light that God keeps revealing to you day by day? Do you hear life calling? When you wake up in the morning, is life calling for you to do something? Do you move toward that with courage and faith, or do you keep running away from the pain because of the fear and the doubt that's in your life? And what God wants us to know is that even though this is a love story, it's not without sorrow and pain. In verse 18, it says, now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. And when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. And Martha ran out to Jesus and said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And it sounds in that moment a lack of faith, but I actually think it's a bit the opposite. Like, I wonder if we have faith in Jesus like that. Right? Because she was saying, if you're only here, my brother wouldn't have died. She knows that the Lord has incredible power, that if we actually trusted in him, if we were there, like, he would do something amazing. She believes in that. But he wants us to know that even in this, it's not without sorrow. And so as Martha is doing this, she's talking to Jesus. She goes on to say, I love this too. I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha, and I love this part. Because Martha answers, I know he'll rise again at the resurrection of the last day. And what she's saying is, you ever have those friends that are like perhaps going wrong in your life? And they're like, oh, like thoughts and prayers. Right? Positive vibes. You're like, thanks. And she's like, thanks, Jesus. Like, I really thoughts and prayers. Like, yeah, I actually would have liked you to, like, you know, feel my heart. Like, don't send me your stupid thoughts and prayers. I don't care what it is. It means nothing. I want you to show up so my brother wouldn't die. She said, I know he's going to rise again in the resurrection of the last day, but that doesn't change the pain and the loss that we have now. And then Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. I need you to hear this is not simply poetic description of Jesus, but a radical revolution of our understanding of reality. They thought life was a linear experience. From life to death, and then hopefully that afterlife. And Jesus is saying that life is something that is present in the moment that can happen now. Not just later. That the ones who believe in me will live even though they die. So he doesn't eliminate the reality of death. But for the first time, he's introducing the reality of life. And whoever lives by believing me will never die. Whoever lives by believing me will never die. This is what he's saying to them over and over again. Do you guys believe this? Blessed, yes, she replied. I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come to the world. And after she said this, she went back and she called her sister Mary aside to the teacher. And here she said, she was asking, when Mary heard that, she got up quickly, went to him where Jesus was, and then would not enter the village, but was in this place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went and followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb and were there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was, she saw him, she fell at his feet. Which wasn't the first time that she fell at his feet. Deeply moved in the spirit. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come see, Lord, they replied. And the next verse is the shortest, but perhaps the most deep verse in all the scriptures. But then there's also life. And so for you guys, even in here today, I want you to understand this. There's sorrow, there's sadness, there's grief, and there's loss. And what Jesus is saying is if I have this in my own life, why wouldn't you have this as well? Because often sometimes that people use pain in the world to prove that God does not exist. Right? They say this, that if God existed, why would there be pain and suffering in the world? And they use this as an excuse to say, no, since this happened, then God didn't show up, then God isn't real. The funny thing is, if you come to that conclusion, you're still left with your pain and your sorrow and your hurt. And now you don't have anybody there to be alongside of you and comfort you. And what people don't realize, if you push through that pain and that hurt, with Jesus there, we actually get to experience life. The one thing that requires Jesus to even start to do that is even just this for us to take that step. We're not going to run from him. God invites us into love. It's weird. The one thing that God cannot actually force you to do is to love Him. And maybe it's not that He can't, it's that He won't. That He leaves that to you. He chooses not to impose that, and God invites you, but He invites you into love. And the worst part about that is, the most insane part about it is the one thing that will actually do it. We choose to love Him and follow after Him. You ever wonder why you do the things you do, even when they cause you pain? It's because you believe somehow on the other side there's going to be life. And what Jesus is saying is, choose me, follow me, there'll be life. We're going to get to Lazarus coming up in a second. I want to tell you the story, and I'll share this with you because it's such a story. Before my wife and I got married, we got engaged. That's the way to do it, right? I figured. Just pick your wife. My wife, right? Like, you don't get to just do that. Right? This is my other one. No, you don't get to just do that. You have to go through the steps. You propose, you do all that stuff. So, I didn't just propose once, I actually proposed twice. So let me tell you how this happened. My wife and I met out of college, started dating. I was there getting my 4-year degree, my bachelor in theology. She was there just kind of in the 1 year, so she kind of came like halfway through what I was doing. She did a 1 year, moved back to Calgary, where she's from, started working, and then we ended up, dating long distance, that sort of thing. We both kind of realized, hey, we actually really like each other. So we decided, let's move forward towards marriage. So, I did the thing, popped the question, all that fun stuff. So meanwhile, after I finished Bible college, I finished my degree. I moved back down to the States. We're kind of dating long distance. We're planning this wedding, and I went to go visit her in Calgary. Maybe about 4 months before the wedding. You ever have one of those feelings like when you're with something, or like you just feel like something's wrong or something's off? There's like this check in your spirit. And I remember feeling that when I got there, but I was kind of just like, maybe it's just nerves because we hadn't seen each other. We're just like talking on the phone all the time. So maybe it's just that. But about like halfway through the trip, she comes clean and says, hey, I've actually cheated. Right, with this guy at the restaurant she worked at. And I remember in that moment, those depths of those moments where you feel depressed and you feel alone, and that's your soul reminding you that you're designed for life. And so Jesus speaks into the moment while Lazarus is dead. And he says, now that he's dead, let's have a conversation. Love this. Now that you think there's no next chapter. Let's talk about the next story. And in verse 38, it kind of all comes to a head. And Jesus once more was moved. He comes to this tomb which was a cave, which was at a stone that was laid across the entrance. And he commands the people, take away the stone, says Jesus. And I love this. Martha said, Lord, and it was a very clearly organized person that is type A, that was like an OCD person that was very detailed. It says, Lord, this is for the dead. It says, I need you to understand that he's been in there for a little bit. Right? And I love this, because John, even in this moment, you guys realize some of the language and some of the words that he's using. He keeps saying dead man. We all know it's Lazarus. He wants you to understand this guy was dead. But it's not just some other guy. It's this man that was dead. And he says, okay, I want you to roll this stone away. And so they said, okay, we'll remove it. And then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took the stone away. And Jesus looked up at his Father and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. You knew that, and I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And I love that way Jesus prays here. We can learn a lot from the ways that Jesus prays. And it's almost a little awkward, right? Because it's almost like we get this sneak peek into what Jesus and his conversation, his relationships right? Like he's probably like, okay, I know we pray all the time, we talk all the time. Like it's usually in my head. You talk to me in my head, I talk to you, but let's do this out loud so people can understand how we're supposed to pray, right? It's a lot of work. And Jesus invites everyone into this intimacy with the Father, and then he says this. He said with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And then he says again, a dead man. So this, a dead man came out with his hands and his feet wrapped in stirrups of linen and cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take the grave clothes off and let him go. And this is such a powerful moment of the story, right? Where John is letting us know that Jesus loved Lazarus, he loved Martha, he loved Mary, he knew them intimately by name, he called them out by name. And now Lazarus, who's been dead for 4 days, what he's going to do is he's going to prove to everyone watching that life is calling you, and if you respond, that you'll actually conquer the power of death. And Jesus cries out, and he doesn't, and I love what he doesn't say. He doesn't just cry out like, okay, come on out. Because I feel like if you were just to say, okay, dead guy, or dead people, dead guy, like, come on out, like all the dead guys would come out. And it would be like The Walking Dead, like, it would be this crazy, like, zombie apocalypse. No, not really. But I wonder, like, but what does he do? He calls them by name. He says, Lazarus, come out. And I want you to understand, like, he's calling you, and it's not a generic call. That Jesus is on one end of the phone, and he's just waiting for you to pick up. The problem is, oftentimes, we're busy. We're either taking another call, we got our phone on Do Not Disturb, and Jesus is waiting for us. He's calling you. He's calling you by name. And so when you go back home, what I'm asking you guys is what is that going to look like in your life when Jesus is calling you by name to move forward, to move out of death into life? Because when Jesus looks at them and says, I am the, listen to what he says. He says, I am the resurrection and life. He's saying that eternity is not linear, it's relational. And you don't go into eternity, you step into eternity when you enter into a relationship with God that you're created to be. And out of death and despair, he takes it and he moves it into hope, into forgiveness. And then, spoiler alert, I wish some of the guys who preached before me would have said spoiler alert on all their movies that they've wrecked for me. Spoiler alert, at the end of the book of John, Jesus dies, raised from the dead. And John 11 is a foreshadowing of what's going to happen. Lazarus' resurrection was God's way of letting you know something that's really important. That if Jesus, and this is really important, if Jesus never raised Lazarus, you would wonder if Jesus raising from the dead himself was a one-time thing. Or you might even think, yeah, he could do it because he's God. But him raising Lazarus is actually a way of saying, no, like this isn't just for him, it's for you. And I don't just mean the eternal side of you. What he's trying to do is call you into life. He's trying to call you away from you moving to pain. And I'm asking you guys, as you're heading home, and as you're thinking about God, like, what do you have for me? What's next? I'm in this weird chapter. I'm in this weird phase, and I don't know what to do. I'm sad. I'm depressed. And what God is asking you to do is to be bold and to push through that pain, push through that, and to seek Him and to lean on Him and to trust Him in those moments. Because what He's trying to do isn't just trying to alleviate your pain. He's trying to build your character. Men, hear me. There's nothing more important in your life than your character. Because when those hard times come, that's what's going to push you through. The work that Jesus has done ahead of time, before you get to those hard times, is what's going to give you life. It's going to push you through. And what you're going to find is when you push through the pain, when you push through the hurt, you're going to find that life. And if I could leave you with anything, is like, don't quit. Keep going. Keep pushing even when it gets hard. Trust in the Lord. Trust that this is a love story. Trust that He has His best interest, your best interest in mind. I had this pastor, this mentor friend that said to me once, like, you have to remember that God is predictably good. Let me say that again, God is predictably good. And if we trust that and believe that, we'll start to see those moments that we thought were death were actually life. He's raising us from death to life and moving us from pain to hope. And I wonder how many guys in here just have felt like The Walking Dead. And you're just a shell of who you wish you ever could be. And maybe if you here this weekend thought, like, man, I'm coming here maybe to meet friends or whatever, but you're secretly maybe you're hoping that God will do something amazing in you. I want to encourage you today that God's not done. This isn't it. There's somebody in here wish like you got prayed for. The time where Andrew said, hey, Chris, whoever said, sit in your seats, we'll come and pray for you. And you didn't. You just said, no, I'm not going to do it. It's too hard. It's too tough. I want to give you guys that opportunity now. I'm going to pray for us. But I want you, if you are in maybe that spot, and maybe you feel like you're in one of those transitions, and maybe you feel like death has just been surrounding you in this sense, and maybe you just feel depressed, and maybe you feel hurt, and maybe you feel lost, and you're like, God, I need you to step in, and it feels like we've been having that different conversation, but I need you in this moment, and God, help me, give me the strength, give me the endurance to push through. And if that's you right here, right now, I want you to stand up. And the guys around you, here's the thing. I love it when I get to pray for people. I love it. But my job is not just, I'm not the professional who just is the only one who knows how to pray. God's given you the tools to do that. And so if there's a guy standing next to you, and I'm going to ask you again, if that's you, stand up. If there's a guy next to you, I want you guys to lay hands on this man, and I want you to pray for him. Pray that the Lord would give him endurance. Pray that the Lord would give him hope. Pray that the Lord would help him have the strength to push through the pain, because on the other side of that pain, there's life. And if that's you, I'm going to give you another opportunity. Stand up right now. If that's you and you say, God, I need prayer. My life is sucked. And as we respond, guys, right now, if there's someone standing beside you,